Got it.
That's excessive.
I
Okay.
know. All right. Okay. So, should we just do this like a book club or should we actually cover the points we're supposed to?
So I just am hang on one second. I'm looking at the podcast thing real quick. I have it pulled up.
Okay.
So I'm just going to kind of go over it. I'm sure you guys have read it.
Mm-hmm.
The group discussion podcast will address the following. After reading the epilogue and the encounter with the family, imagine you were the owner of the funeral home. What would you say to Sam when you return to the funeral home? And what would you say to Grace when you return to the funeral home? And then it's going to ask that you reference your answer to the discussion question regarding characteristics and skills in assignment 3 and provide examples of it. And then reflect on the concept and transactional and relational discussion, an example in which Sam and Grace demonstrated in each of these concepts throughout the story. And then each group member will select one discussion from any chapter 1 through 12, and discuss the question and their answer. Then number 5 was reflecting your own experiences and or beliefs. What, if any, will this book have on your role as a funeral director and the families you will serve? And then it looks like one person will be responsible, which is you. And then it just says it has to be 15 to 30 minutes. Each group member should contribute into the dialogue in a noticeable and meaningful way.
Got it.
So
Okay.
do we all have access to like our group 3 discussion assignments? Like, can you guys all pull that up on your computer?
I discuss
Yeah,
or
I
the
have mine up.
assignment 3, is that what you're talking about?
It just says number 2, reference your answer to the discussion
Yeah.
regarding characteristics and skills in assignment 3. Yes.
Yeah.
So
I've
I'm gonna pull
already
mine up real quick.
I've already got my notes out, so
Same.
I'm ready to rock.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and start and I'll pull mine
Okay.
up and then we can kind of go from there if that works for you guys.
Yeah. So I went ahead and took down some notes. I don't know if we want to go one and all of us share two, all of us share three, or if we should just rock it out and do all of them at once, each person.
I think that's going to be easier. That way she isn't worrying about who participated and what, if we can all knock out all of our
Okay.
questions and then we'll
Yeah.
Yeah,
just kind of go
I
whoever's
agree.
prepared on what,
Okay.
if that works for you guys.
Yeah. So
Okay,
as
cool.
far as for the first question on the response to the epilogue, um obviously if a customer or client of your firm or whatever is so upset still and you see them at the grocery store and they're still crying, that definitely did not look good on Sam, I don't think. And you would definitely want to have a talk with Sam and address his effectiveness, maybe give him an opportunity for self-reflection and a self-evaluation of what maybe he is missing out on and what he could have done more. And then obviously Grace is just knocking it out of the park. And I think that it already covered like how he gave her the opportunity for like peer-to-peer training in their next staff meeting that they had. I think that that was a great opportunity for Grace to share her methods of working with families. I did really like looking back on lesson 2.2 and the idea of the funeral practitioner and then the helping characteristics. Sam is somewhere in that level 2, neutral or ineffective, and maybe a little bit into level 3 as helpful. And then Grace definitely is hitting that level 4 of facilitative, being consistent and committed to helping and utilizing all of those characteristics, all 13 of those characteristics. Now, looking at the second question, what helping characteristics and skills can you like identify? I just stuck with Grace because, as I had already mentioned, Sam's just kind of phoning it in and doing the basic, you know. So looking at Grace characteristics, I had wrote about immediacy, and I felt that Grace did a really great job of exemplifying being present, and in the moment with her clients, and being there through all steps of the process. As far as skills, the skills that I talked about was the attending and listening. And so Grace was very attentive and really good at listening. They even at one point in the book talked about how she was active listening. Um, and so she went further and further than just the listening and attending, and like researched her client's mom, Carol, and to be able to provide an even more rich experience through the ceremony. As far as transactional relational for question 3, um, in the arrangement conferences, Sam didn't push or explain why having a visitation might be beneficial. He was just, all right, that's fine. We'll keep moving forward. Just very transactional with the process. And then Grace took the time to explain the how and why of how it helps, what it provides, closure, inviting the community, everything like that. Grace definitely exemplified the relational aspect, whereas Sam was just about getting through it and getting along with his day. The question 4, I chose to talk about the aftercare chapter. Um, and so, let's see here. What did I write? Sam affirms, oh, this is the question. An aftercare question. It was about how Sam continually affirms to Jennifer and Jack that their feelings are normal. And do you think that this is helpful for them? Um, I don't think that he was that helpful by saying that, oh, what you're feeling is normal. It was just a kind of a band-aid statement that was empty and didn't really provide support. Um, it is just because it's normal doesn't make it any easier. And Sam didn't provide the family with a meaningful opportunity to process the grief of their mother. Um, and then the last part of reflecting on your experience and beliefs. Um, honestly, I don't I want to be more of an embalmer and working with like direct cremations, and um I don't really plan to be like that involved of a funeral director. So for me, I'm more concerned about finding a balance between their two approaches, because at times I kind of like rolled my eyes and was like, oh Lord, I thought Grace was a little over the top. And when they set the butterflies free, I was like, ugh, I couldn't handle it. And then I talked to my preceptor, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we've had butterflies before." I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I can't handle this. I'm not that sentimental of a person. Um, I am about animals. Like I would do everything for my dog's funeral, but like that was just it just got a little too cheesy for me. But that's my personal opinion. So I feel that Sam got the job done. Grace went above and beyond. But I mean, I'm not like a huggy. So she maybe would have turned me off, you know? I think it like the different approaches work for different people.
Well, and I think to add on that, like we look at families, right? Like when we are like I work like I said for a family owned funeral home and I work for a corporate funeral home. And at a corporate funeral home, you just get the director that's available. Like you don't get a choice. But at our family owned funeral home, I often find like my preceptor will designate the people with the right director, whether it's himself or Brad, like whether or not, Brad is best suitable for this family based on the interaction that they've had. And I think, you have that opportunity in a family owned funeral home, which in the book, that's what they are. But then I think there's a downfall of like corporate funeral homes too, where you don't get that option, but you also have to work with what the family wants. Now, I mean, I totally agree with what you said. Like, she is a little bit over the top. It's excessive. I don't think funerals should be weddings, but
Right. Yes. All right, but that's my notes. That's all I got. So whoever wants to go next.
I just broke my glasses. So sorry.
Awesome.
Oh no.
I'm ready. Drew, I can go. That sound good?
Yep.
Yep, that
Yep.
works.
All right. I'm basically just going to read off. And one, my response to Sam would be that that as night and day funeral homes, we need to help educate families about having a meaningful funeral service in honor of their loved one. Also to better help the grieving process and to share their loved one's life with the public that will in turn help the families better process their grief. For Grace, my response would be thank you for you and Sophie for going the extra mile and helping the family decide to publicly celebrate their loved one. That effort includes everyone, yes, your effort includes everyone and strengthens grieving families by showing them that their loved one mattered to a lot of people, and without it, they wouldn't have known so many people cared. My helping characteristic, and in the third was warmth and caring. I believe warmth and caring were evident in both Sam and Grace's, but especially Sam's. She went above and beyond for the family to make them feel happy, confident in their loved one's story being told, making sure to highlight an amazing life that touched a lot of people. My interpersonal skill was summarizing. I wasn't a lot of summarizing. Maybe when Grace and Sophie made lists and reviewed them for the upcoming visitation service, I thought. For number 3, Sam's transactional. When Sam was in arrangements with the Williams family, he chose to focus on services and merchandise over the family's emotional and personal needs. Sam's relational. Sam showed this relational aspect when he took the time to listen to the family stories, showing his genuine empathy and understanding. Grace is transactional. The only moment I believe she was transactional was in discussing the financial aspects of the funeral, but is also a necessary aspect. For Grace is relational. When Grace asked open-ended questions to the family to help spark meaningful conversations and show her heartfelt empathy while building trust with the family. My number 4, my question was from chapter 1, and the question was, why am I choosing to be a funeral director? I want to help guide families through their grief journey and to truly show my empathy and support to those who need it. And how have my motivations evolved since I first made that decision? Well, the more I get into it, funeral service industry, the more I know that little things matter, and know I will be very good with my communication skills to make this happen. Number 5. I believe this book will always be in the back of my head when serving new families, helping me always to push myself to genuinely give all I can to those who need and deserve my best effort.
Okay. I'll go next if everyone's cool with that.
Go for it.
Okay. So for number 1, okay. So talking to Sam, if I were the funeral home director and I was talking to Sam, a little hard because I wasn't really with him when he was making the plans, because I would want to tell him that you were very kind of dismissive of Jennifer. I feel like you kind of favored Jack a little bit over her, which he wouldn't know that, but let's pretend like he did. So anytime Jack gave a little bit of pushback, he immediately was like, okay, no problem, we won't do that. But anytime Jennifer was like, oh, I don't know, it almost was just never addressed. So that I think we would need to talk about. I didn't like that at all. But with Grace, what he said to Grace, like I liked what he said to her. I think he was, he was like, "Hey, you did great." She was very happy when I saw her, and to have her teach like a little class or seminar or whatever it was he wanted her to do, I didn't think that was a terrible idea. She could maybe dial it down a little bit, but better than Sam, I would say. So, and then okay, so for my discussion question or my discussion characteristics, I chose the same thing as Megan. I chose immediacy and attending and listening, which I feel like Grace did very, very well. Like when she came in to the transfer to get Carol, she immediately was like, "Can I meet your mother?" Whereas Sam sat down, had some coffee, and started talking like, "Do you have any plans for the funeral?" And so I feel like Grace really took the time to be there and, like learn about the family. And then there were a couple of times in the arrangement or the arrangement conferences, sorry, I have a cold, where Jennifer would kind of get off track and start talking about her mom, just like about her life and things that really didn't have to do with her funeral arrangements. And Grace let her and also use that as just a way to like learn more and like add that into her obituary and kind of really, I don't know, make the funeral more like fit to her. Whereas Sam, he was kind of just like, okay, moving on. Okay, moving on, and then attentive and listening. Once again, Grace, like anytime Jennifer wasn't sure about something, she sat there and explained it. And anytime Jack gave a little bit of pushback, once again, she sat there and kind of really explained it so they could kind of make decisions that they both agreed on. Whereas, once again, Jennifer would say, I don't really know. Sam said, okay, moving on. And then that kind of bleeds into number 3 for me, the transactional and relational. Sam, like I have said 100 times, and I guess I'll say it 100 times more, anytime he got a little bit of pushback, like he would say, oh, do we want to do a luncheon or something? And Jack would be, oh, do we really have to feed people? He's like, oh, okay, you're right. Moving on, So he was very just like, get the plan down and let's just do this. Like I said, the second walk into the house, he sits there and goes, okay, what are we thinking for the funeral plan? Like, what do we want to do with her? Would I don't have to get permission to embalm like right then and there, but that was kind of like his first question. I'm not saying he was cold. He absolutely wasn't cold. He was just very, let's get this done. What am I talking about? Oh yeah. And with Grace, her transactional moment, I think like what Chris was saying was really just talking about like Pine Box and figuring out a way they could agree on the coffin or the casket that they wanted to use. But other than that, she was really just relational, I think, through and through, very huggy, very like learning more about their mother and like all about her life and everything that she could do to make not only the family but also the friends feel like this was a funeral that really spoke about Carol. Um, like I said, Sam, he kind of had like a set list of like a typical funeral, and he was like, let's just do this, you know? And then, oh, okay, so then the question I chose was I actually chose the same one as Megan, and I hope that's okay, but the chapter 12, question one, Sam was good at affirming Jennifer and Jack's feelings or that they are normal. Do you think this helps them? Why or why not? So yes and no, because like they are normal and they do need to know that. And I think Jennifer was really kind of concerned about how much trouble she was having getting over, or not getting over, but coming to terms with her mother's death. But with Sam, he just felt very like, oh, it's normal. Okay, moving on, which I've said 1,000 times and I'm gonna say it again. And he just like with Grace, I feel like she really sat there and she spoke and she was like, what you're feeling is normal. And, I completely get it. And if this is hard, we can take a break. Sam, he gave him a break, but then he left. And then he came back and goes, okay, are we ready to move on? And so it just felt kind of like a band-aid to kind of try to get them through the meeting. Yes, you're crying, but you're normal. Let's go. Let's move on. And then reflecting on your own experiences and our beliefs. Okay, so also like Megan, I'm hoping to be more on the bombing end of this and not so much the directing end. Um, so this one, but I wrote this book in the back of my approach as opposed to Sam's approach because I don't know, I just want to okay, I
Hang
wrap
on,
this
you're
up. Go ahead.
frozen.
You cut out.
You cut out that whole last part of question 5.
What?
It cut out when you were talking on 5. Oh,
Oh, did we lose her?
I don't know. Maybe she'll pop back in and finish. Here we go.
Okay, sorry, just go ahead, forget me, go Olivia, we're running out of time.
Okay. So on question 1, after reading the epilogue, basically what I would say to Sam, I mean, obviously we don't know the whole situation. He wasn't there, right? Like, I don't think really anybody knows truly what happens between a director and their families unless you're sitting in on the meeting. And I would basically just return to Sam and just say to him that this is the feedback that we got from the funeral home, this or from our family. This is what they were feeling. And I would kind of ask some follow-up questions to ask how he felt like the arrangement went and how, things from the beginning, from, like the time of the removal to the aftercare, to kind of through the whole thing, how he really felt that things went and see if there's any feedback based on what he said compared to the family. And then what I would say to Grace is clearly that they were thrilled with everything that they were able to give or that she was able to give. So I think that was great. I reflect a lot on how I am a lot like Grace. And in the sense of, especially during the times of removal, every time she did during that time of the transfer is literally everything I have done with families. So I often relate to Grace. And for my corporate job, even though I'm an admin, I do a lot of removals with them, like from Sunday nights into Wednesday mornings. And oftentimes the guy I work with is a lot like Sam, and I'm a lot like Grace. So I often see it. And it's a lot of the very similar situations. So I relate. And, I get a lot of compliments on how I am with removals. And I take a lot of pride into that just because I think that's like really the starting mark of how your dialogue with the family is going to go from the time of the arrangement. And I'll just add, like I did one last week, and the family ended up being at my chapel, and they like loved me. Like she gave me a tip for doing the removal and she didn't have to do it. Like it's something that clearly I don't expect, but it was just so good to see all of that, and I love seeing them again. So that was kind of nice. Um, Referencing my answer to the discussion in number two, the helping characteristic I chose was genuineness. And the reason I clicked or chose that one is just because often it is the most help or important helping characteristic, because I don't know. I feel like a lot of the times, like when you get people like Sam, they don't feel genuine about their job. And people like Grace, they love what they do. And now that's not to say everybody who is like Sam, who are more transactional, are like that. But when you truly like, if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, you don't seem inconvenienced by having to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like you're actually happy to be there, like you're personable. And I think that's something that I take a lot of pride and joy in. And that's something I work really hard at, even though I may be 4 Red Bulls deep. That is something I truly, truly love doing. It kills my husband, but I love being up at 3 a.m. just because I know that I'm helping families who are going through the most difficult time that they've ever been through, especially if they've not experienced grief. Um, and I reflect on that because I had a lady who came in and her mom was 91. She was 54. I mean, that's more years of your life that you've had with your mom that you will have without. And I often go back to that point, is how lucky are they? And then I get the 22-year-olds who lose their mom of a disease like addiction, and that's really hard. And, I can't necessarily say that, but I often reflect on being genuine. And those kids are sometimes my age, and it's really hard to see them go through that. When I hit on number three, the reflecting of the concept of transactional and relational, I feel like Sam a lot of the time was transactional, and then maybe it's because, I mean, he's been doing it for so long and he is experienced, but I feel like oftentimes even some of my most experienced funeral directors that I work with, they lose that sense of genuineness just because, like, one of the guys I work with, he's like ready to retire and he's just so over it. And I get that, like, after you've done 50 years of it, like, you're tired. But, I understand that. So it's understandable. But that was like a lot of what I saw in Sam. But he was relational in aspects of like validating feelings, but he didn't do it as great as Grace did. Um, Grace, I thought, was only transactional during the financial situation. And I think financials are just a crummy conversation to have with any family. I hate having them because you pay so much for something that I feel like every decedent should be given, regardless of how those funds come. Well, you don't know whether it's like county assistance or whatever, but um, Grace was great about validating. And that kind of goes into the question that I had chosen. It was chapter 2. And it was Grace asked more questions about Kara Williams than Sam does. Why do you think she does this? And I think a lot of that tips into number one, being relational. Like, I want to know about my decedents. I would rather have a 10-minute conversation than go from removal to removal, not knowing about anybody that I just took into my care. And I love having those personal conversations. I love knowing who they are and I love hearing their stories. And I think that's why I love what I do. And I think that's like the greatest part about why I love doing removals, because you get a little bit of that in each one. And then on number 5, reflecting on my own experiences and beliefs. I love this book. I think it shows 2 different parts of funeral directors. Now, I love being in the prep room. I've watched a lot of embalmings. I've had the privilege of doing that. And I would say I love meeting with families, but I think it becomes a lot. Like, my corporate funeral home is split up between being an arranging director to being a cremator and removal staff and an embalming. I would like to work for a family funeral home where I kind of get a little bit of each. I don't know that I would want to be in the prep room all the time, but I love doing removals, but I don't know that I would want to meet with families all the time either, because I think it's a lot. It's a lot to handle. It's a lot to handle, especially when your funeral home does, 9,000 calls a year. So that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know which part I would be, but I will often say that this is a book I will go back to quite often.
Well, yes, we're at our 30-minute mark. I'm not sure how long I've been recording, if we've been recording that whole time.
We have 5 minutes left.
5 minutes left. Okay. So, do you guys have, after hearing everyone, what they've shared, any like final thoughts that you want to add to the discussion?
I just think this book overall is great. I mean, I thought at first I was like, ew, why are we reading a book? I'll be honest, I am not a big reader. If I can avoid a book, your girl will avoid a book on any cost. I don't care what it will take, I will avoid a book. And the more I read it, the more I was like, okay, this is a book that I would go back to. I just think it teaches you different ways to talk about families, and I think that's a really great thing is like now I don't think everybody has to be like Sam or be like Grace. I think there's a happy medium, but now like I said in the beginning, I don't think funerals should be weddings. I just don't. I just got married in September and I would never want to do my wedding all over again. It was the most stressful thing I have ever done, and it was my second one, and I was like, no, thank you. I will never do this again. Now my mother-in-law would plan a wedding all over again. Like she would want me to get married a second time to her son if that meant she could plan another wedding, and no thank you. I would never do it again. But so that's why I don't think they should be funeral services, but I think there's ways to add like personal things that aren't as excessive as Grace does.
I agree.
I probably won't revisit this book. I too am not a big reader. I do read to learn. So the fact that I know it's a fictional book, right? I don't read fiction. I'll I'll read to learn about something new. And so for me, the nar- uh the novel s whateverness to this book, I'm out. I mean, it got its point across, but it was a little too much for me. Oh, and then the phone dropping, and then the magical worlds like becoming one. I was like, oh Lord, you know,
I
it
read true
was
crime. If you get me in front of a book, it's true crime, but
yeah, I know. Or like I'll learn my jam is like haunted things, I'll learn
yes,
about like all the haunted stuff. Um, but yeah, I this it was lovely, but it is probably not something I will ever pick up again.
going in Megan's stack of things.
Agree with you, Olivia, on I don't read very much at all. I don't, but it does get you thinking, just how different people receive and what matters most to families. We don't really know. And I do, having been in the business for or just a couple years, from day one till day now, I mean, there's still things that surprise, the littlest things that come up each day, the people that you meet out and about that you never thought they would have picked up on something that meant the world to them. So it does make you think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like the removal I did the other night was just incredible. Like I wish all of my experiences were like that, and I know they aren't going to be, but everything about it, like I went home talking about it. My husband's like, Olivia, it's 4 a.m. Like I'm going to bed. I have to be up in an hour. And I was like, but I have to tell you about this. And he was like, I'm going to bed. But then I got to meet with the family the next day, and then they were in on Thanksgiving to do a private viewing. So the removal was done on Tuesday. They were in on Wednesday for their arrangement, Thursday for a private viewing, and we're doing their witnessing cremation on Tuesday. And I get to be there for that. So I just love every ounce of that. I love, and I don't get that very often working for a corporate funeral home. Like you typically don't get to see families from the beginning to the end, but it was awesome. Like I wish they were all like that. And I know obviously they aren't going to be, but it's just like those little things. And they were awesome. Like, and she was like, you just did so much. And I was like, I just did my job. So I love hearing that. But
That's awesome.
Brittany, you got anything to add? We have a minute left.
Nope, you guys covered it. You did
Sounds great.
great.
Megan, you'll submit this link.
Yeah, I will.
Okay. Sounds
Okay.
great. Well, it's lovely to meet you
Thank you
all.
all.
Yeah, it was great, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.